then we don't end up using it. You have a limited amount of energy, and try to keep it focused into the really honed, finely cut diamond, not the rough one that you find in the mountain. Back to you. Sorry.
Yeah, Sean, I was going to ask you. I forgot what I was going to ask you. Oh yeah, about being a writer-director. Like you've just written, and you've been a writer-director. A lot of us emerging filmmakers, we wrote something, we want to direct it, and that's a lot to bite off and to have some objectivity about your work. I just wanted to hear your thoughts about approaching it that way.
Well, when I started, especially when I was in film school, I wrote and directed everything that I did because I wanted to be, Jim Jarmusch or Woody Allen or whoever. But as I've gotten older and I've seen people go through the independent movie process again and again and again, I would advise you to either A, work with a writer who is the primary writer, or if you want to be part of the writing process, collaborate with somebody. And the reason that I advise you to do that is because, going back to my first golden rule, as you're directing, the writing hat just tends to slip off because you're focused on so many other practical issues. You're focused on your actors, you're focused on the visualization of your story and all these other things. If you're collaborating with somebody from concept all the way through the entire film, then you have somebody who's constantly looking at the script, who's constantly offering new ideas or a new way to do a particular scene based on what he or she is seeing. And and filmmaking is such a deeply collaborative process. It's a great way to insure yourself against that sort of tunnel vision that we've been talking about, in which you write this script, hold on to it, even though it's too expensive, it hasn't been rewritten enough, it's not working for this reason. Working with another writer can really help. Even if you want to be both the director and the writer, that other person can be a wonderful sounding board and a wonderful grounding for you creatively.
Yeah, and you guys were writer-directors, right? How did that work for you? What kind of challenges did you face? And
I have on my first feature, I co-wrote it, so it was really nice. But it was I made it for this company, and they had a bunch of notes on set, so I actually had to rewrite. It was kind of crazy because I was first time directing and rewriting half the script. Mm-hmm. So it was really hard to take off the hat and put the other one on, and again it was, but because I carried that kernel, I was like, okay, I got to remember what am I writing, what am I rewriting, because they're throwing you notes and you're like, this is gonna pull this thread and then it's gonna make all this other stuff not make sense. But I really do like working. I write some stuff on my own, and I also have co-writers on stuff, and it just depends on what the project is. I'm writing a pilot that's a comedy one with my brother, and then my friend, it's whoever it is, it's I like to just kind of bounce ideas off somebody, so I like that idea, and I kind of like TV writing in that way too.
Well, yeah, I would say exactly the same thing. My first film, I co-wrote, and it allowed me to have just a looser relationship to the material that I needed to have once we started filming. My second film, I didn't write at all, and it was that much more useful to just be able to feel authorship over changing the material as you're shooting it. I think if I had written either one solely, I would have been much more precious about the details, much more precious about the dialogue even. And when you have an hour to shoot a scene, because sometimes these schedules on these independent films, especially my first film, were so tight, I had to have the liberty to be able to work with actors and allow them to find a way to wrap their minds and literally their mouths around the dialogue in a natural way, and they wanted to change it often, just kind of shift it into their inflection. And I think if I had been the sole writer on either of these projects, I would have been much more precious about things like that, and I wasn't, and that worked to our benefit.
Cool. Okay, I have a question for the audience. How many people here, I assume you're all here because you want to do a feature. Is that correct? You can raise your hand. Let's just see. Who else is doing a feature here? Excellent. How many of you have done a short film? Good. One of the things that I was going to say is that's one of the best ways to understand the relationship between your script and realized film. Don't just jump into a feature and figure it out there. Take some baby steps. You know, short films, I'm a big fan of them anyway, just as they are as an art form. I like to make short films even if I'm making features. But if you know, if it's a stepping stone for you in some way, definitely use it as a way to understand the relationship between the written word and how it's realized on